I just have a short presentation to anchor the discussion this morning about, just want to be sure this is working. Okay, great. About just to set the conversation going this morning and also to introduce Seamless HR, talk a bit about what we do and why we do what we do, and hopefully drop some ideas that challenges us to think about human resources and productivity for our institutions in Africa. We're building the technology to help institutions, public, private. I didn't mention that we have a bunch of governments across the continent who use our software as well. So the real goal is to help institutions to become more productive and successful using technology and to optimize their resources. And we think that this mission is a worthwhile mission in Africa, especially in Africa, because our continent does need everything we can to improve the productivity of our continent. Next slide, please. I wish this can work so that I don't have to say that. Why Africa? Next slide. You can try to help me make this one. Next slide, please. Why Africa? Africa is blessed with human and material resources. 18% of the world's population is African. 18% of the world's population is African today. 40% of the youth of Africa's population is youthful. And if you compare that to Europe, where you have about 18% of Europe's population that is youthful. So Africa is significantly more youthful than any continent in the world. 19% of the world's youth are in Africa. If you fast forward this to 2050, sorry, that's an error there. In 2050, Africa will have 2.5 billion people. Africa will have 26% of the world's population, and 33% of the world's young people will be in Africa. The point is, humanity started from Africa, and I think that the future of humanity is in Africa. In fact, by 2100, 8 out of every 10 people in this world will be either African or Asian. So Asia and Africa will constitute 80% of the world's population by 2100. I don't think I'll be around by 2100, but I mean, a few people in this room I wish to be around by 2100. But by then, this continent will be, and Asia will be most of the world, will be African or Asian. And so from a human resource standpoint, incontrovertibly, Africa is the future of the world. And Africa is persistently the youngest. One of the things that is happening in that trend is that Asia, of course, is the largest continent in the world, but the population of Asia is dropping, actually, as Africa's population is going up to meet the population of Asia. And you find that most of the young people in the world by 2100 will be Africans as well. If you tell the resource story, 30% of mineral reserves in the world are in Africa. 66% of diamond in the world is in Africa. 40% of the world's gold is in Africa. 65% of the arable land that is uncultivated in the world is in Africa. 73% of the world's cobalt, 90% of the world's chromium and platinum. This is a rich continent. By all means, I don't think that the world can be sustained without Africa. I mean, for instance, look at cobalt. As you're moving to electric vehicles and electric all that, 73% of one of the key resources to drive an electric world sits in Africa. But this picture changes when you look at the next slide. This is 3%. The actual figure is 2.7%. Do you know what this 2.7% is? 3% is the percentage of Africa's contribution to global GDP. Africa contributes 2.7%. This is the continent that has 30% of the resources and will have 26% of the people in the next few years, only contributing, actually, that's 3% was an approximation, 2.7% of global productivity. To add additional context, for instance, the state of Texas, I do spend a good part of my time in Texas. Texas is the second richest state in America. The state of Texas has about the same GDP as Africa. State of California is the richest state in America. California does have 3.9 trillion in GDP. So California is richer than Africa. That's one state of the 50 states in the US. But I think it's an anomaly on many levels. We can blame a lot of things. We can blame our history. There's a lot of things in our past that has held us back. We can blame other people. We can say, oh, the colonial influence on Africa is the reason why there's this. We can blame all these other things. But we know that this is not right. We can blame economic structures. I personally think, for instance, if you have 30% of the gold, we've structured a financial system where the world gives you printed paper in exchange for your gold. The printed paper is called dollar, but it's literally printed paper. And you come up with your resources and you give it and you get printed paper, and then it tells you that you're poor because you don't have enough printed paper, right? But this is the name of the structure of the world. Gold is no longer the exchange tender in the world, so all of us have to spend this printed paper that we cannot print, that can only be printed in America. There are all these things that affect the wealth of the world, but we can blame all those things and point fingers at those things. However, we have to also look inward, or look at the woman in the mirror or the man in the mirror and say, what can we do differently in our continent to at least in our lifetime change the trend of things? And unfortunately, this trend is worsening. So for instance, with artificial intelligence, the rest of the world is getting access to faster productivity than Africa. We build AI, and part of the things that we struggle with now is the ability to pass the cost of AI to our customers. Because African customers cannot pay a premium because, of course, we're dealing with all our economic challenges, and AI costs money. So all of these fancy cameras that is measuring performance, those fancy cameras will be very expensive. And because we don't have these printed papers, we can't participate in the next wave of productivity. I mean, I would say, God forbid. I mean, Africa, if we miss artificial intelligence, we'll be missing the next train. And this figure will not be 2.7 or 3%. It's going to go down to 1% because the rest of the world gets significantly more productive, and Africa just sort of moves backward. And so this is something that matters a lot to us. And how do we bridge the gap? I think we're fortunate to be in a room of some of the most influential people to bridge the gap of productivity in the continent. Because manufacturing is producing products. And Africa's manufacturers will play a central role in the value addition to Africa's natural resources. Because what happens is we have 30% of all the natural resources, but 3% of the productivity. Something is lost between natural resources and product. And a lot of what is lost there is manufacturing. And I think that we're sitting in a room with one of the most influential sets of people in Africa who can do something about the productivity of the continent and improve the productivity of the continent. My background is in medicine, as I mentioned, and part of the training that you do get is the respect for the cellular level of life. For instance, cancer is because some very tiny receptor somewhere broke down and then the entire system fails. And in your manufacturing as well, that's true. You know, one small system breaks down, one small system in a plane breaks down, and the whole thing comes down. So the small parts of a system is critical. And no matter how small our institutions are, I believe very much that every institution has a role to play to the improvement of our continent. And we believe in institutions. You can see our mission statement is now. We have to strengthen institutions so that institutions can drive more productivity for generations. We have a lot of work to do to move, hopefully in our lifetime, from 3 to 10. That would be a miracle for our continent. From 3 to 10. That would be a miracle for our continent. And manufacturing will play a critical role. But we cannot achieve that progress without technology. There's no way to achieve progress in increasing productivity manually in the 21st century. It just cannot happen because the rest of the world is leveraging technology at paces that you can't even imagine manually. In fact, technology used to be referred to as witchcraft in many African cultures because it is literally witchcraft when you see the things technology can do. And so, let's say this is an invitation to witchcraft. Because it's the magic of technology. We cannot catch up with the rest of the world if we do not leverage technology. And I think that that's where we come in as your technology partners, at least when it comes to the optimization of your most important resource, which is your human resource. The work we try to do is to make sure that that specialization happens where you can focus on being the greatest manufacturers that you can be and you can allow your partners to focus on supporting you with the greatest technologies that can help your manufacturing work and to manage your most robust resources. I'll tell you something unique. And so for technology built outside Africa, because the market is not able to come up with enough cash to command a lot of attention, Africa is just a market. It's not a place for development. It's not a place to build anything for anybody. But even globally, you'll find that a lot of the tech is built for white-collar workers. But for manufacturing companies, the bulk of your employees are blue-collar workers, people who work the factories. They're the ones who actually hold up our institutions. But they don't build tech for blue-collar workers because they don't understand blue-collar workers. Performance management won't work. Balance scorecard, management by objective, that's not the way you would run a factory. And so part of the advantage of having a company like Seamless HR is that we're able to collaborate with you and focus on the problem. And today we do have a version 1 of our product that works for blue-collar workers, that combines human resource management, payroll, time and attendance management, leave management, disciplinary management. And because this is part of our wider product suite, you're able to also pull in other modules as you wish. Recruitment, if you want to automate that, onboarding, if you want to automate that, exit management, if you want to automate that. You can pull in all these modules that normally would sit in a white-collar sort of solution, but adapted to work for blue-collar workers. And like I said, we've layered on top of that embedded HR financing. We'll be announcing a new round of fundraising that we just closed this week, actually. And part of that fundraising came in from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The reason why Gates Foundation is taking equity in our business is because of the work we're doing in embedded finance. Because of what I was explaining earlier, banks don't look at blue-collar workers. And so the poorest people are the ones who get the worst interest rates. They are the ones who are victims of loan sharks. But because we sit on payroll, mass payroll, we're able to then bring blue-collar workers as a large group to banks and negotiate more competitive interest rates so that they can leverage credit to live a better life. I believe that credit is one of the most brilliant innovations in finance for humanity. Because, for instance, why should you pay for a house that you're going to live in for 40 years? Why should you have to be able to pay for everything before you move in? Because you're going to be here for 40 years, so why do I have to? So the barrier to entry is so high because I have to come up with the money for something I'm going to live in for 40 years. Just doesn't make sense. Credit disrupts that. People buy cars outside of Africa on credit. It's an anomaly to buy a car with cash. But most of Africa, if you don't have all that cash, you can't even get it. So these are the things that keep our productivity at 3% of global productivity because we have all these funny systems that don't work, that keep us away from the things that could give us a better life. And it makes our market smaller. And so that work that we're doing caught the attention of Foundation and a few other investors, and we're sort of doubling down on that work to give employees access to a lot of innovative things that they've never had before, focusing, for instance, on family and lifestyle. So we're focusing, for instance, on like your factory workers. We're building solutions that if they're married, their spouses can have access to certain credit that will increase the family's income so that you can elevate the quality of life of their family, working on scholarship products for their children so that you can save the next generation. And we're using technology to scale that based on all the data that we have and the connections that we can bring to cheaper funding, cheaper access to finance for working people. This is a problem that exists. And I think that the continent is a time of advantage for the continent to have companies like us who are now focusing on that problem to solve that problem for the most important, most hardworking people in the continent. But I'm closing now, and this is where I have an invitation for the folks in the room. We're now building a next version of our blue-collar system. This is like just really leveraging artificial intelligence to build a solution that was primarily for blue-collar workers. And we're launching what we're calling our design partnership. So we're collaborating with, for now, we're doing a lot of engagement in Kenya and Nigeria, but we're also bringing in employers in South Africa and the US to build a solution specifically for blue-collar workers. And the design partnership is going to be over the next 6 to 12 months of building collaboratively. So think of it as a committee of contributors. We're building, we're sharing, we're launching what we're building, we're testing it in your factories, we're making sure it works perfectly for what you want it to work for, how you want to track your employees, performance, communication, identification. Some of the problems that we hear when we talk to these employers is, for instance, identification for blue-collar workers. So you have a driver who maybe drives 500 bags of rice or cement from Mombasa to Kenya, but when they get to Kenya, it's 450 bags that get to Kenya because 50 bags sort of left with human intelligence on the way. And then you fire this driver, but next week, the driver is working in a different subsidiary of the same company because the company doesn't know who is who. Because this is like 5,000 drivers and you don't know who is who. That's something as basic as that happens because there's no technology that actually works for blue-collar worker identification. And so on and so forth. Some of these problems come from our conversations with employers. And the way we see it is that it's impossible for us to build a great solution behind the people who would use the solution. And you're so good at manufacturing, we're so good at technology. Why don't we come together and build a solution that works perfectly for the goal that we both share of improving the productivity of our continent? So we're working with the Gates Foundation. Some funding is coming in for that. We're also working with the UC Berkeley, Berkeley has School of Business, to do a lot of research across the continent and the US, like I said. Because it's critical for us to launch this in America as well and tap into some of that trillion-dollar market in the US so that we can subsidize the work that we're doing in Africa. I talked about AI being too expensive for many customers in the continent, but if we are able to tap into markets where they pay more, then we're able to subsidize that for our own market. So there's a lot of work we're doing to launch in the US. So we would like for you to join our design partnership. The link is here. You can scan the QR code. And we will, there's a selection criteria, but everybody will be able to contribute, although it becomes more complex if we have 50 people that we're trying to get feedback from at this level. However, the first level will be about 15 companies, but we'll be carrying everybody along as design goes on to make sure that even the first iteration of what we're building actually works for manufacturers in Africa and the people who work in your companies. As they say, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And we are looking forward to working with you to build the future of human resource technology and optimization of institutions in our continent. We've done this before. Like I said, we have over 1,000 customers across the continent. At this point, we can't put all our customers on one slide, so just put a selection of customers on the slide. We're fortunate to have the support of these customers to build a solution that works. I usually say to my people, if not this, what? Like, if we're not building HR tech for the continent, what is more important than the people of Africa? If not us, with all the 250 people who go to work every day to build technology that works, who? I mean that seriously. If Seamless HR can't make this work, who's going to make it work? Because no one has made it work before we came. And I'm not saying we're the most important company in the world. I'm just saying that we're putting in all our lives' work on this one problem. And if we don't make it work, who? And if not now, when? If not now that there's technology, there's artificial intelligence, there's funding. When I started out my journey in tech, there was no VC funding in Africa. Now I'm saying we're raising millions of dollars. If not now, when? And I believe that we have all these things coming together, the right time, the right problem, the right people, to build something that we can be proud of as a continent. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.